Chosen one, have you ever been betrayed by the very people you protected? Have you been gaslighted, discarded, abandoned by those you loved most, and still chosen to keep your heart open? And now you wonder, did God even see any of it? Or could it be all of it was preparing you for something greater? Listen to me, chosen one. You weren't being punished. You were being positioned. Every betrayal, every sleepless night, every moment you cried in silence thinking no one understood that wasn't abandonment. That was assignment. They didn't break you. They revealed who they were. You weren't forgotten. You were protected by isolation, refined by rejection, strengthened by their very attempts to destroy you. You see, you were never the target. You were the test, and they failed miserably. Your silence wasn't weakness, it was divine restraint. Your tears weren't just pain, they were sacred data, heaven collecting evidence of what you could endure. While they celebrated your supposed defeat, God was forging a weapon they never saw coming. For years, you were the secret wound no one saw, the silent scream no one heard. You were dismissed, misjudged, mocked for your quietness, and crucified in private by people who smiled in public. But that silence, that was your strategy. That rejection, that was your refinement. And now, they're haunted by the masterpiece they helped mold. You didn't survive that trauma for nothing. You survived because heaven still needs your light. Every attack was actually training. Every betrayal was building something in you they could never touch, never steal, never replicate. You are living karma now. Not seeking revenge, you've transcended that. You are the consequence. Your very existence, your peace, your glow, your unshakable faith, it's God's response to everyone who tried to erase you. And if you're watching this now, it's not by chance. It's by divine appointment. You're entering a sacred moment of recognition. Thank you to every soul supporting this message through super thanks or donations. Your generosity isn't just seen, it's spiritual. Whether you give or not, I'm deeply grateful for your presence. Your time, your attention, your wounded but warrior heart, it all matters. If this message is touching your scars, drop "I am the living consequence" in the comments. Not for revenge, for recognition, because you need to know you're not broken. You're the breakthrough they never expected. You're not the victim of their story anymore. You're the plot twist in God's plank, because what comes next will shift everything you thought you knew about why you were attacked. And now, let's go deeper. They looked at you and saw weakness, saw the tears, saw the trembling, saw how you flinched when they raised their voice, how you apologized for things that weren't your fault, how you carried their shame like it was your birthright. They saw fragile, they saw broken, they saw someone they could step on without consequence. But they were blind to the frequency you carried. You weren't the weak one, beloved. You were the earthquake in disguise. You were divine voltage wrapped in human skin, and every time they thought they were breaking you down, they were actually plugging into a power source they couldn't comprehend. Your sensitivity wasn't a flaw, it was a superpower they feared. Your tears, those weren't signs of defeat. Those were spiritual ink, and God was rewriting your entire story behind every breakdown. Listen to me. When Joseph's brothers threw him in that pit, they thought they were burying a dreamer, but they were planting a pharaoh. When David ran from Saul, hiding in caves, weeping in the wilderness, they thought they were watching a coward, but they were witnessing a king being forged in solitude. And you, every time they mocked your tears, every time they called you too sensitive, every time they made you feel like your emotions were a burden, they were standing in the presence of someone who could feel what they couldn't, see what they wouldn't, carry what they never could. You weren't breaking, beautiful soul. You were being upgraded. See, they thought your silence meant surrender, but your silence was strategic. While they were making noise, you were downloading divine intelligence. While they were performing, you were processing. While they were celebrating your supposed defeat, heaven was installing new software in your spirit that would make you unrecognizable to your former self. They thought mocking your gentleness gave them power, but gentleness isn't weakness, it's restraint. It's a lion choosing not to roar. It's an earthquake deciding not to shake. It's someone with the power to destroy, choosing instead to preserve. That's not fragility, that's divinity in motion. Every betrayal was a revelation. Every rejection was redirection. Every time they pushed you away, they were unknowingly pushing you toward your purpose. Because God doesn't waste pain, and He doesn't allow attacks without upgrade. You carried their criticism like a cross, didn't you? Let them tell you that you were too much or not enough. Let them convince you that your depth was dysfunction, that your intuition was imagination, that your prophetic spirit was just paranoia. But what they called weakness was actually your weapon forming. The tears you cried in secret, those were prayers heaven heard in surround sound. The nights you laid awake wondering if anyone understood you, those were vigils with the Most High. The times you felt invisible, that was God hiding you until your season arrived. They laughed at the ashes, but didn't know you were a phoenix studying the wind. Now watch this. Every person who underestimated you is about to learn a hard lesson about spiritual mathematics. Because when you mess with someone who's connected to the source, you're not just fighting them, you're fighting the force that chose them. And that's a war nobody wins. You see it now, don't you? How their attacks always seem to miss the mark, how their words stung but never stuck, how their schemes fell apart right when they thought they had you cornered. That wasn't luck, beloved. That was divine interference. That was heaven saying, "Touch not my anointed." Your presence is starting to shift atmospheres now. Walk into a room and watch the energy change. Not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you're finally owning what was always yours. You're not just surviving anymore, you're thriving with a frequency that makes the unhealed uncomfortable and the authentic feel at home. They thought they were dealing with just another human. But you were a walking portal, a living frequency, a divine disruption disguised as vulnerability. And now that the disguise is coming off, now that you're stepping into who you really are, they're realizing they weren't fighting a person, they were fighting a force. Your tears carved rivers of compassion in your soul. Your silence built chambers of wisdom in your spirit. Your pain pressed diamonds of character into your DNA. What they meant for evil, God orchestrated for elevation. You weren't the victim of their story. You were the plot twist they never saw coming. And now you're walking evidence that what the enemy meant for harm, God flipped for power. You're living proof that some souls can't be broken, only awakened. You're breathing testimony that divine favor doesn't need human approval. They called you powerless, but you were the power itself, just taking time to remember your name. Comment, they underestimated a storm, if you know you were born with fire in your bones. Because what's coming next will show you exactly why heaven allowed every attack and why your enemies are about to understand what happens when they mistake mercy for weakness. The frequency you carry is about to become the frequency that frees others. They called you quiet. They called you withdrawn. They whispered behind your back that something was wrong with you, that you were broken, bitter, too sensitive for this world. But what they didn't understand was that your silence wasn't emptiness. It was fullness. It was the weight of truth they couldn't carry. Your silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. See, when you stopped explaining yourself, when you stopped defending your heart to people who were committed to misunderstanding it, something shifted. You became a mirror, and mirrors don't lie. They reflect exactly what's standing in front of them. And what stood before you, their ugliness, their jealousy, their rottenness dressed up in righteousness. They painted you as crazy because your clarity made them uncomfortable. They said you were paranoid because your intuition exposed their schemes. They called you dramatic because your authentic emotions revealed how dead theirs had become. But here's what they never saw coming. Your silence wasn't empty. It echoed every lie they told themselves. Every night they lay awake, your quietness became thunder in their conscience. They couldn't escape the sound of their own hypocrisy bouncing off the walls of their minds. You didn't curse them. You became the reflection that revealed their rot. And now they're drowning in the truth they spent years running from. Remember Job? Saturday in ashes while his friends accused him of secret sins. His silence wasn't guilt, it was grace under pressure. His refusal to defend himself to small minds became his defense before the Almighty. That's your lineage, chosen one. That's your spiritual DNA. They thought your silence meant they won, but you were just giving God room to work. Now watch this. They painted you as crazy. Now they can't sleep without checking if you've moved on. They scroll your life like a detective searching for clues that you're falling apart. But every post, every picture, every glimpse of your peace sends them deeper into their own chaos. You're not even thinking about them, but they're obsessed with every breath you take. They thought you disappeared, but you became the shadow their conscience now wrestles with. You became the standard they can't reach, the authenticity they can't fake, the peace they can't purchase. Every relationship they enter, they compare to what they lost when they lost you. Every moment of fake happiness is haunted by the real joy they witnessed in your presence. Your absence became more powerful than your presence ever was. You didn't need revenge. Your peace is the punishment. Listen to me, warrior of light. While they celebrated your departure, God was orchestrating your elevation. While they laughed at your breakdown, heaven was witnessing your breakthrough. They thought they were getting rid of a problem, but they were rejecting their solution. David knew this truth when he refused to kill Saul in the cave. His restraint wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. His silence wasn't submission, it was sovereignty. When you have the power to destroy someone and choose not to, You reveal a strength they'll never comprehend. You didn't fight back because you didn't have to. The universe was fighting for you. Every lie they told about you became a lie they had to live with. Every manipulation they used against you became a manipulation that turned on them. Every door they tried to close became a wall that trapped them in their own prison. Your silence became their sentence. But here's where it gets beautiful, chosen one. Here's where the plot of your story takes a turn that even Hollywood couldn't write. You didn't just survive their attacks. You transformed because of them. You didn't just heal from their betrayal. You evolved beyond their reach. They thought they were breaking you down, but they were burning away everything that wasn't authentically you. You didn't burn the bridge. You became the flame, and they're still choking on the smoke. Every breath they take is filled with the residue of their choices. Every relationship they attempt is clouded by the memory of what they destroyed. They can't move forward because they're still looking back, wondering how someone they discarded became someone they desperately wish they could reach. Your silence didn't just protect you, it exposed them. It revealed that their confidence was borrowed, their peace was performed, and their power was pretend. Without you to absorb their chaos, they had to face it themselves, and they're drowning in it. Elijah knew this power. After confronting the prophets of Baal, he didn't stick around for applause. He went to the wilderness and found God in the whisper, not the wind. Your silence is that whisper, chosen one, and it's louder than their screaming. You are the living consequence of their choices, not because you sought revenge, but because you sought truth. And truth has a way of making itself known, even when it wears the face of someone they thought they silenced forever. They're not fighting you anymore. They're fighting their reflection, and it's a battle they can never win. Your energy didn't just say enough. It said everything. It said, I'm worth more than this drama. It said, I deserve better than this dysfunction. It said, I choose peace over proving points. And that energy, that divine, unshakable, unapologetic energy became a frequency they can never tune out. If your silence became your sword, drop my energy said enough. Because what's coming next will show you exactly how God has been using your pain as a paintbrush to create a masterpiece they never saw coming. And now, the revelation deepens. Listen to me, warrior. Every person who turned their back on you, every voice that called you crazy, every hand that pushed you down, they weren't your enemies. They were God's construction crew. And they didn't even know they were clocking in for heaven. You think those betrayals were random? You think that rejection was just bad luck? No, beloved. Every betrayal was a chisel. Every insult was a sacred hammer hit. Every time they tried to diminish you, they were carving away everything that wasn't your true self. They thought they were tearing you down, but they were sculpting a monument. See, when Joseph's brothers threw him in that pit, they thought they were ending his story, but God was writing the opening chapter of his elevation. When David was running from Saul's spear, he wasn't being hunted, he was being trained. Every cave became his classroom. Every night of hiding became his graduation. And you've been in the workshop of the Almighty. They mocked your dreams while unknowingly building your destiny. They laughed at your vision while God was adjusting your focus. Every person who said you'll never make it was actually prophesying your arrival. They just didn't know which side of the prophecy they were on. Here's what they missed. You weren't the project. You were the blueprint, and they were just hammers in God's hand. Think about it. Every person who hurt you had to be positioned perfectly to carve exactly what needed to be removed. That friend who betrayed you, they revealed your capacity for forgiveness. That family member who abandoned you, they taught you self-reliance. That boss who overlooked you, they trained you to see your own worth. God didn't just protect you, He used them. They became the laborers in your divine construction. Every cruel word was calculated to build your resilience. Every closed door was strategic, forcing you toward the path that was always meant for you. Every person who walked away cleared space for those who were supposed to stay. You were being refined, not rejected. Prepared, not punished. Positioned, not persecuted. Remember when Elijah thought he was alone on that mountain? Thought God had forgotten him? But God whispered, I have reserved 7,000 who have not bowed. While Elijah felt isolated, God was orchestrating. While you felt abandoned, heaven was arranging. Your isolation wasn't punishment, it was purification. Your silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. Your tears weren't weakness, they were washing away everything that wasn't meant to remain. And now look at you, still standing, still breathing, still believing, still glowing with a light they couldn't extinguish no matter how hard they blew. That's not survival, that's supernatural. Every attack made you stronger. Every setback set you up. Every delay was divine timing. They were trying to bury you, but God was planting you. They were trying to silence you, but heaven was tuning your voice. They were trying to break you, but the Almighty was making you unbreakable. Here's the revelation that's going to shift everything. They weren't working against God's plan. They were fulfilling it. Every Judas kiss positioned you for resurrection. Every Goliath taunt trained you to use your slingshot. Every Pharaoh's no led you closer to your promised land. They thought they were writing your obituary, but they were actually drafting your testimony. You are living proof that what man meant for evil, God used for good. You are walking confirmation that no weapon formed against you shall prosper. You are breathing evidence that all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to His purpose. They were praying for your downfall while unknowingly building your altar. Think about that. While they were scheming in darkness, God was designing in light. While they were plotting your failure, heaven was orchestrating your victory. While they were celebrating your supposed defeat, the universe was preparing your comeback. You weren't their victim. You were God's secret weapon. And now? Now you walk differently. Now you talk differently. Now you carry yourself with the confidence of someone who knows they've been through hell and came back with heavenly authority. You're not bitter, you're better. You're not broken, you're unbreakable. You're not defeated, you're divinely appointed. Every scar tells a story of survival. Every tear that fell watered the ground of your becoming. Every night you cried yourself to sleep, you were actually crying yourself awake. Awake to your power. Awake to your purpose. Awake to the fact that you are not who they said you were. You are who God says you are. And God says you are chosen. God says you are loved. God says you are more than a conqueror. God says what they meant to harm you only made you harder to break. You are the living, breathing consequence of their failure to destroy you. You are the walking testimony that God's plans cannot be canceled by human hatred. You are proof that divine purpose is stronger than demonic opposition. So thank them. Not because you're grateful for the pain, but because you're grateful for the power it produced. Not because you enjoyed the process, but because you're amazed by the product. Not because the journey was easy, but because the destination was worth it. They tried to break you, but God used them to build you into something they could never break again. Type God used the enemy to build me if this truth hits you hard. Because what's coming next will show you exactly how your pain became your power and how your silence became your strongest weapon. Listen to me, beautiful soul. I need you to understand something that's going to shake the foundations of how you see what happened to you. You weren't just someone they lost. You were the exam the universe gave them, and they bombed it spectacularly. You were the opportunity wrapped in human skin that they couldn't recognize, the sacred detour they mocked, the divine assignment they treated like a burden. And now life keeps failing them in the same looped lessons because they refused to learn when the perfect teacher was standing right in front of them. That teacher was you. You remember those nights, don't you? When you laid there wondering what you did wrong. When you replayed every conversation, every moment, asking yourself if maybe you were too much, too deep, too real for them. But here's what I need you to see with spiritual eyes. You weren't too much. You were the final test. God doesn't send His chosen ones to play games. He sends them to reveal character, to expose what's real and what's counterfeit. And baby, you walked into their life carrying divine standards they couldn't meet. You were Joseph in Potiphar's house, your integrity so bright it exposed their compromise. You were David before Saul, your anointing so authentic it triggered their insecurity. You were Elijah in the wilderness, your silence so powerful it made their noise sound hollow. They failed you because they were failing themselves. Here's the spiritual mathematics they never understood. When heaven sends you a chosen one, it's not just about relationship, it's about revelation. You came carrying mirrors they didn't want to look into, standards they didn't want to meet, growth they weren't ready for. And instead of rising to the occasion, they chose the easy path. They broke the mirror. But you can't break what God has made unbreakable. See, they thought they were rejecting you. What they were really doing was rejecting their own elevation. They thought they were protecting their comfort zone. What they were actually doing was choosing spiritual stagnation. They mocked the sacred detour that could have changed their entire trajectory. And now they're stuck in cycles they can't break, patterns they can't escape, because they dismissed the one person who could have helped them evolve. You were their GPS recalculating, their spiritual upgrade notification, their divine intervention dressed in human form, and they said no thanks and kept driving toward the cliff. That's not your failure, beloved. That's their spiritual bankruptcy. Remember how they made you feel crazy for having standards? How they called you dramatic for wanting depth? How they labeled you needy for expecting basic respect? That wasn't judgment on your character, that was the sound of someone failing their test in real time. You were the question, will you choose love over ego? They chose ego. You were the question, Will you grow or stay comfortable? They chose comfort. You were the question. Will you value what's real or chase what's easy? They chose easy. And here's what's happening now in the invisible realm. Every person who comes after you, every relationship they try to build, every connection they attempt, it's all being measured against the standard you set. And they keep coming up short because artificial can never satisfy once you've tasted authentic. You spoiled them for counterfeits. You ruined them for shallow. You broke their ability to be satisfied with less than real. That's why they can't stop thinking about you. That's why your name still makes them shift uncomfortably. That's why they can't quite get it right with anyone else. Because you weren't just a person in their life, you were the benchmark heaven set. God didn't curse them when they lost you. He just removed you. And that absence, that's their punishment. They're living in the consequence of failing the most important test of their spiritual development. They cheated on the test by lying about your worth. They plagiarized by trying to make you small. They failed by choosing pride over growth. But they forgot one crucial thing. You were the final question. And final questions determine whether you pass or fail the entire exam. They failed loud, publicly, spiritually, and now they're repeating the grade while you've already graduated to levels they can't even imagine. You're not the one who got left behind, precious soul. You're the one who got promoted. They're still sitting in the same classroom, taking the same test, with different people, getting the same results. But you've moved on to advanced placement. You're operating on frequencies they can't access. You're walking in dimensions they can't reach. Because when you survive being undervalued by those who were supposed to cherish you, when you maintain your standards even when they call you crazy, when you choose self-respect over settling, heaven takes notice. And heaven promotes accordingly. The tragic irony, they're still looking for what they lost in you. In every new face, every new connection, every attempt at filling the void. But you can't find authentic in the clearance section. You can't download depth from the surface web. You can't manufacture what was divinely original. They lost the limited edition, and now they're stuck with mass-produced mediocrity. Here's your spiritual declaration. I was the test, and their failure is not my failure. I was the opportunity, and their blindness is not my dimness. I was the upgrade, and their rejection is not my downgrade. Drop I was the final test if you now know your worth. If you understand that their failure to see your value was never about your value, if you're ready to stop taking responsibility for someone else's spiritual eyesight, because what's coming next will show you exactly how God uses that failed test to become your greatest testimony. Listen to me, wounded warrior. You spent years wondering when justice would come, when the scales would tip, when God would finally show up and vindicate your name. You prayed for lightning. You begged for thunder. You wanted them to fall so hard the earth would shake. But karma didn't come as thunder. It came as you. You see, while you were crying out for revenge, heaven was crafting something far more devastating. Not destruction from the outside, transformation from within. They thought they buried you. But seeds don't die in the dark. They multiply. You walk in the room now, and the atmosphere corrects itself. Remember when they used to mock your sensitivity? Called you too much, too deep, too broken? Now that same sensitivity reads souls like scripture. Your intuition cuts through lies like a sword through silk. They can't hide behind masks anymore because your presence strips pretense bare. You don't glow, you radiate karmic memory. Every scar they gave you became a sensor. Every tear you cried became a truth detector. Every sleepless night they caused trained your spirit to stay awake while others sleep through deception. You're not just healed, you're weaponized with wisdom they can never touch. They wanted you gone. God wanted you grown. Think about Joseph, thrown in a pit by his own brothers, sold like livestock, forgotten in prison for years. But when the famine came, who did Pharaoh call? The same dreamer they tried to destroy. The pit became his promotion. The prison became his preparation. You are living that scripture right now. Your silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. While they were celebrating your apparent defeat, heaven was downloading divine intelligence into your spirit. Every betrayal was a master class in human nature. Every rejection taught you who deserves access to your energy. You're the confrontation they can't mute. They thought breaking you would break their problem, but they created something far more dangerous, a soul who can't be manipulated, can't be controlled, can't be convinced to settle for less than truth. You've seen behind the veil. You know how the game is played, and you refuse to play it. Your presence alone convicts them now. Watch how they fidget when you enter the room. Notice how their voices change when they speak your name. Feel how the air gets thick with unspoken truth when you're around. That's not intimidation, that's the Holy Spirit using your very existence as a mirror they can't escape. God didn't tell you to fight back because your glow would do the fighting. Every door they slammed taught you to build your own. Every bridge they burned showed you roads they couldn't see. Every relationship they poisoned cleared space for connections they could never contaminate with their toxicity. You became unreachable to reach others. The same walls they built to cage you became the foundation you rose from. Their rejection was heaven's protection. Their betrayal was your graduation from needing their approval to breathe. You stopped explaining yourself because your evolution speaks louder than words. Remember David, anointed king while still a shepherd boy, but the crown came with a cave, hiding from Saul's jealous rage, running from the very throne God promised him. But those cave years, they weren't delay, they were development. Learning to lead in darkness, building faith in isolation, becoming unbreakable before becoming unshakable. Your wilderness season forged warrior DNA into your spiritual bloodstream. They didn't lose you. They lost the grace that was keeping their life from collapsing. You were their covering and they didn't even know it. Your prayers were their protection. Your love was their lifeline. Your presence was the plug keeping their peace from draining out. When you left, so did their spiritual umbrella. Now they're getting rained on by their own choices. The same storm they sent is now their forecast. The same chaos they created is now their climate. The same pain they planted is now their harvest. And there's nowhere to run because you can't escape yourself. But you're dancing in the rain they thought would drown you. Your tears watered seeds of resilience they can never uproot. Your silence grew strength they can never steal. Your distance created space for blessings they can never block. You are the consequence walking in flesh and spirit, not seeking revenge because you've transcended the need for it, not plotting their downfall because their own choices are handling that beautifully, not cursing their path because you're too busy blessing your own. You are karma with a heartbeat, justice with a soul, divine correction wrapped in human skin. They created an enemy, and heaven delivered a prophet. They wanted to watch you fall, and God gave them front row seats to your resurrection. They tried to write your obituary, and the Holy Spirit turned it into your origin story. You didn't get revenge, you became it. Your very existence is God's response to everyone who said you wouldn't make it. Your peace is heaven's answer to everyone who tried to steal it. Your joy is the universe's middle finger to everyone who tried to kill it. You are living proof that what's meant for you can't be stopped by who's against you. If you are the karma, not the curse comment, I am the consequence. Because it's time you owned what heaven already confirmed. You're not the victim of their story anymore. You're the author of your own, and the next chapter. It's going to leave them speechless while you speak volumes without saying a word. You know what they were really afraid of? Not your tears, not your breakdowns, not even your silence. They were terrified of your becoming. They saw something stirring in you, something ancient, something powerful, something they could never touch or claim or control. So they built cages out of doubts and disguised them as love. You're being too sensitive. You're dreaming too big. You need to be realistic. Every word was a bar. Every criticism was a lock. They whispered fears into your spirit, not to protect you, but to paralyze your wings before you even knew you had them. But here's what they didn't understand. You can't cage a soul that's been kissed by destiny. Remember Joseph? His own brothers threw him in a pit, sold him into slavery, convinced their father he was dead. They tried to bury his dreams 6 feet under jealousy and betrayal. But pit after pit, prison after prison, Joseph kept rising. Because when God plants a vision in your spirit, even dungeons become launching pads. That's you. Every time they pushed you down, you were actually being positioned higher. You didn't rebel against their limitations. You outgrew them. Like a tree splitting concrete, your growth was inevitable, unstoppable, undeniable. They kept watering you with criticism, thinking it would kill you. Instead, it fed your roots deeper into divine purpose. And that glow you carry now, that's not makeup. That's not confidence. That's the radiance of someone who broke every lie and stepped into their destiny. That's what happens when a soul refuses to stay small in a world that profits from your shrinking. They're not just uncomfortable around you anymore. They're convicted. Your presence alone exposes every compromise they made, every dream they abandoned, every time they chose safety over calling. You became the mirror they can't avoid, the question they can't answer. What if I had believed in myself the way they believed in theirs? But you were never shrinking. You were stretching for the crown they swore didn't exist. Think about David in that field, just a shepherd boy with a slingshot while his brothers suited up for war. They mocked his youth, dismissed his courage, told him to stay in his lane. But David had something they didn't. He'd been alone with God in those hills, wrestling lions, facing bears, building faith muscle in the quiet places where no one was watching. That's your story. All those years they called you crazy, too much, too deep, Too intense, you were in training. While they were playing politics, you were building character. While they were chasing applause, you were cultivating anointing. Now your light doesn't just shine, it exposes. Your peace doesn't just calm, it convicts. Your joy doesn't just inspire, it intimidates those still living in fear. They tried to convince you that small was safe, that quiet was wise, that dreams were dangerous. They needed you to believe their limitations were laws, their fears were facts, their cages were castles. But you outgrew their vocabulary. You outgrew their vision. You outgrew their version of what your life should look like. And now they're watching from the bleachers of their own mediocrity while you walk in the fullness they said was impossible. This isn't about revenge. This is about revelation. Every time you show up as your authentic self, every time you speak your truth without apology, every time you walk in your purpose without permission, you're not trying to hurt them. You're just living free. And freedom is the loudest testimony of all. The same voice they tried to silence is now speaking life into thousands. The same spirit they tried to break is now breaking generational curses. The same dreams they called foolish are now funding other people's miracles. You were never too much. They were just not enough to contain what God was growing in you. Remember Gideon, hidden in a winepress, threshing wheat in secret, convinced he was the weakest in his family. But God saw something different. Mighty warrior, the angel called him. Not because of who he was, but because of who he was becoming. The hiding wasn't cowardice, it was preparation. The fear wasn't weakness, it was the last thing standing between him and his destiny. They tried to keep you in the winepress of their approval, threshing dreams in secret, hiding your light under their limitations. But God has been calling you mighty warrior this whole time. Your season of hiding is over. That burning in your chest when you walk into a room now, that's not anxiety, that's anointing. That confidence that makes them uncomfortable, that's not arrogance, that's authority. You're not becoming someone new, you're finally becoming who you always were before they convinced you to be smaller. Every door they slammed taught you to build your own. Every opportunity they blocked showed you there were paths they couldn't see. Every time they said no, God was preparing to say yes in ways that would leave them speechless. You stopped asking for their permission to be great. You stopped waiting for their approval to be free. You stopped shrinking to fit their expectations and started expanding to meet your calling. And now, your very existence is their education. Your glow is their conviction. Your peace is their mirror. Your success is their reminder of what they could have been if they'd chosen faith over fear. You've outgrown every lie they told you about yourself. You don't fit their box anymore. You never did. If you've outgrown every lie, declare it. I don't fit their box anymore. Because, chosen one, this is just the beginning. What they tried to kill was never meant to die. It was meant to multiply. They thought recovery meant going back to who you were before they broke you. But you didn't recover, beloved. You transcended. You didn't patch up the old wounds, you grew new skin. And this new skin, it's made of boundaries they can't cross, wisdom they can't touch, and a light they can't dim. You see, what they called your breakdown was actually your breakthrough disguised as destruction. You forgave what was unforgivable, not because they deserved it, but because your soul demanded freedom. You gave grace when they gave knives. You offered mercy when they served malice. And that choice, that divine choice to rise above their frequency, that's what separated you from the pack forever. This glow ain't skincare, it's soul care. This radiance they can't explain, it's the result of choosing love over bitterness, choosing growth over grudges, choosing God over getting even. Remember Joseph, thrown in a pit by his own brothers, sold into slavery, forgotten in prison. But when Pharaoh's dreams needed interpreting, guess who had the keys? The same man they tried to bury became the one who saved nations. Your pit season is over. Your palace season has begun. You walk like storms bowed to you first. There's something in your stride now that wasn't there before. It's the walk of someone who knows they survived what should have killed them. You carry yourself different because you are different. The universe rewrote your DNA through pain, and now you're operating on frequencies they can't even hear. But here's what really terrifies them. You didn't survive for applause. You survived for transformation. While they were busy celebrating your supposed downfall, heaven was busy orchestrating your comeback. Every tear you cried in secret was being collected as evidence. Every night you couldn't sleep was preparing you for dreams they couldn't even imagine. Every moment you felt forgotten was actually you being positioned for something they couldn't prevent. You didn't just heal, you evolved. You didn't just grow, you glowed up from the inside out. This isn't about revenge anymore, this is about renaissance. You became the very thing they swore could never rise from those ashes. They're not angry because you changed. They're angry because you changed without their permission. Your elevation has exiled them from access. Your growth has locked them out of your energy. They can't feed off your pain anymore because you don't carry it. They can't drain your light because you've learned to guard it like the sacred flame it is. And that silence they once mocked, that became your superpower. That introversion they called weakness, that became your strength. You learned to speak to God in the quiet, and now when you speak to the world, they hear heaven's echo in your voice. You've become dangerous in the most beautiful way. Dangerous to their lies because you carry truth. Dangerous to their chaos because you embody peace. Dangerous to their darkness because you are the light. David knew this feeling. Running from Saul, hiding in caves, written off as finished. But those same hands that played the harp became the hands that slayed giants. Those same feet that ran from enemies became the feet that danced before the ark. Your season of hiding is over. Your season of rising has begun. You didn't transcend to prove them wrong. You transcended because it was always written in your spiritual DNA. This version of you, the healed, the whole, the holy, this was always the plan. They just couldn't see it because they were looking with wounded eyes. Your new boundaries aren't walls, they're wisdom. Your new standards aren't pride, they're protection. Your new energy isn't cold, it's consecrated. You've been set apart for something they'll never understand because they're still speaking the language of hurt while you've learned to speak heaven. And now, when they see you, they don't just see someone who survived. They see someone who thrived. They see someone who turned their deepest wounds into their greatest wins. They see living proof that God's plans can't be canceled by human hands. You are the answer to every prayer you cried when you thought no one was listening. You are the miracle you begged for when hope felt extinct. You are the comeback they said was impossible, wrapped in skin they can't ignore. This transcendence isn't just personal, it's prophetic. You're not just healing for yourself. You're becoming the proof that others need to see. Your transformation is someone else's permission slip to rise. Your breakthrough is someone else's breakthrough waiting to happen. So when they stare at you now with that mixture of awe and regret, remember this: you didn't transcend to hurt them. You transcended to heal a world that was watching to see if resurrection was still possible. If you're walking in your divine upgrade, if you feel this shift in your bones, if you know you're not who you used to be and you're never going back, drop "I transcended" below. Because this isn't just your testimony. This is your transformation speaking to every soul that's ready to rise. And what comes next? The world gets to witness what happens when the chosen stop hiding and start shining. Because your transcendence was never just about you escaping their darkness, it was about you becoming the light that guides others home. You know what's eating them alive right now? It's not anger, it's not hatred, it's recognition. Deep in their chest, where the truth lives, they know they weren't fighting you. They were fighting their own reflection. And that mirror you held up, it's still there, even though you walked away. Especially because you walked away. They screamed you were toxic, but now their life is corroding from the inside out. Every relationship they touch turns to rust. Every connection they make feels hollow. And in the quiet moments, when the distractions fade and the noise dies down, they hear it. Your silence, your truth, your echo bouncing off the walls of their conscience. You were never their enemy. You were their mirror. See, this is what they can't run from anymore. Every time they look at someone new, they see what you gave them. Every time they try to love shallow, they remember how deep you went. Every time they settle for surface, they feel the weight of what real connection used to feel like. With you, they don't miss you. They miss who they pretended to be when they were around your light. That's the knife that keeps twisting. Not that you're gone, but that the version of themselves they could only access through your energy is gone too. You didn't just leave their life. You took their best self with you. The self that laughed easier, loved deeper, spoke truth instead of hiding behind lies. Joseph knew this pain. Sold by his own brothers, forgotten in prison, abandoned by those he helped. But the mirror he held never cracked. And when his brothers stood before him years later, trembling, they weren't afraid of his power. They were afraid of their own reflection in his eyes. You tried to outrun guilt, but their dreams now carry your echo. In their sleep, when the ego can't protect them, you show up. Not as the person they hurt, but as the truth they rejected. You appear in their dreams wearing the wisdom they refused to hear, carrying the love they threw away, speaking the words they silenced. And they wake up gasping, not because you haunted them, but because they haunted themselves. This is spiritual mathematics. Chosen one. What they put out has to come back. But it's not coming back through circumstances. It's coming back through consciousness. Every time they try to forget you, life gives them someone who reminds them of what they lost. Every time they try to justify what they did, their own heart convicts them. You are the mirror they tried to shatter. And now, everywhere they go, they see you, not as you were, broken and bleeding from their betrayal, but as proof of who they weren't. Proof that they chose ego over growth, lies over truth, comfort over courage. And that proof is written in the way you carry yourself now, in the peace you found, in the light you've become. David faced Saul's spear, but he never threw one back. And Saul spent his last years haunted not by David's revenge, but by David's righteousness. That's where your enemies are now, haunted by your light, convicted by your growth, destroyed by your peace. They wanted you to break so they could feel better about being broken. But you didn't break, you bloomed. And now they're living in a world where your very existence proves their excuses were lies, where your healing proves they could have chosen differently, where your joy proves they were the problem all along. This is why they can't stand to see you now. It's not jealousy, it's conviction. You're walking proof that people can change, grow, evolve, and they chose not to. You're living evidence that love without conditions is possible, and they chose conditions. You're breathing testimony that forgiveness doesn't mean doormat, and they chose to see your grace as weakness. You weren't the war. Their conscience is. Every time they see you thriving, their inner voice whispers, that could have been us. Every time they watch you love someone new with the same depth they rejected, their heart aches with the weight of missed opportunity. Every time they witness your peace, their chaos gets louder. The mirror you held didn't lie. It revealed, and what it revealed was that they were standing at a crossroads, choosing fear over faith, pride over love, control over connection. You were their invitation to evolve. They chose to devolve instead. Elijah stood on the mountain while the prophets of Baal screamed and cut themselves, begging dead gods to answer. But Elijah whispered, and fire fell. That's you now. You don't have to scream anymore. Your presence is the fire. Your peace is the proof. Your healing is the miracle that makes their false gods look foolish. They're not fighting you anymore. They're fighting their own reflection. And they're losing. Because you can't win a war against truth. You can't defeat someone who's already forgiven you. You can't break someone who's already whole. They threw stones at a mirror, and now they're bleeding from the shards of their own making. This is divine justice in motion, not revenge, reflection, not punishment, recognition. The very thing they tried to destroy became the thing that exposes them. The light they tried to dim became the spotlight on their darkness. If you've been mistaken for the enemy when you were the mirror, drop "I reflected truth" in the comments, because that's what you did. You reflected back to them everything they were afraid to see in themselves. And now they have to live with that reflection every single day. You weren't their problem. You were their possibility. And they chose to reject possibility for comfort, truth for lies, growth for stagnation. But here's the beautiful part. While they're fighting their reflection, you're living your resurrection. And that resurrection is the greatest mirror of all. Because what comes next will show you exactly why their war with themselves was always going to end with your victory. You didn't just survive what broke others. You became something they never expected, something unforgettable, something that haunts their sleep and whispers through their quiet moments. You're not walking anymore. You're declaring. Every step you take is a testament, every breath a proclamation that says, I am still here, and I am more than you ever imagined. They thought they buried you. Instead, they planted you. Look at you now, not just healed, transformed, not just recovered, reborn. You're not a comeback story. You're a cosmic correction. The universe looked at what they did to you and said, watch this. And now you're the thunder in their quiet life, the storm they can't escape, the memory that makes them tremble. You became the living proof that God doesn't just see betrayal, He weaponizes it. Remember when they counted you out, when they whispered your name like a warning, when they made your pain their entertainment? They thought your silence was surrender. They mistook your withdrawal for weakness. But you were never hiding. You were healing. You were never running. You were rising, like Joseph in that pit, thrown away by his own brothers. You couldn't see the palace from the prison. But every betrayal was positioning. Every rejection was redirection. Every tear you cried in secret was heaven taking notes, building your testimony brick by brick. You didn't just make it through, you became it. The answer, the proof, the living evidence that God's justice isn't loud, it's undeniable. They mock what they can't understand. They fear what they can't control. And you, chosen one, have become both, uncontrollable, unstoppable, unforgettable. You're not seeking their attention anymore, you command it. Not through drama, through presence. Not through words, through being. Your very existence is the sermon they never wanted to hear. Feel that power rising in your chest? That's not pride, that's purpose recognizing itself. That fire in your eyes? That's not anger, that's authority being activated. You're not the same person who begged for their understanding. You're the person who transcended their comprehension. You became the frequency they can't tune out, the truth they can't deny, the mirror they can't avoid. Every prayer you whispered through tears counted. Every betrayal that shattered your trust counted. Every night you laid awake wondering if God saw you. He was building you, molding you, creating something so powerful that when you finally emerged, even your enemies would have to acknowledge there's something different about them. That something is divine favor wearing human skin. You're not just blessed, you're dangerous. Not to harm, but to heal. Not to destroy, but to demonstrate. You carry the kind of power that makes pretenders nervous, that makes liars uncomfortable, that makes the fake feel exposed just by being in your presence. You became the storm they thought would destroy you. You became the fire they thought would consume you. You became the earthquake they thought would bury you. But storms don't destroy, they clear. Fire doesn't consume, it purifies. Earthquakes don't bury, they shift foundations. And you shifted everything. The moment you stopped explaining yourself and started embodying your truth, the whole dynamic changed. You're not asking for respect anymore, you're commanding it. Not through force, through frequency. The energy you carry now is so undeniable that even your haters have to pause and wonder, how did they become this? Divine intervention wearing designer clothes. Sacred power wrapped in human form. You didn't come back to prove anything. You came back to echo through every soul that dared to touch you wrong. Your presence is the answer to every lie they told about you. Your peace is the response to every storm they created. Your joy is the judgment on every attempt to steal your light. You became God's revenge dressed in forgiveness, His justice wearing mercy's face. They can't look away now, not because you're demanding attention, but because you're impossible to ignore. You walk differently, you speak differently, you exist differently. You carry the confidence of someone who has been through hell and came back with heaven's endorsement. Your scars became your credentials. Your pain became your PhD. Your betrayal became your badge of honor. This is your becoming, not your arrival, your becoming. Because chosen ones don't just reach destinations, they transform into destinations. People don't just see you now, they experience you, feel you, remember you long after you've left the room. You're not just a person anymore. You're a moment, a shift, a before and after in people's lives. You didn't come to explain what happened to you. You came to demonstrate what happens when God decides enough is enough, when heaven steps in and says, now, show them who you really are. This is your time, your season, your moment to stop hiding the masterpiece you've become and let the world witness what divine justice looks like in human form. If this is your becoming, if you feel this power stirring in your soul, if you know you're God's living evidence, declare it with your whole being. I am God's living evidence. Because what comes next will show you exactly how to walk in this new authority without apologizing for the light that now burns so bright they can't help but watch. You know what they never told you about being chosen? You don't just carry light. You become the frequency heaven uses to recalibrate the spiritual atmosphere around you. Every room you enter, every life you touch, every enemy who watches from the shadows, they're all receiving a transmission they can't decode but can't ignore. You are what happens when pain gets anointed. See, they thought breaking you would silence you. Instead, it turned you into God's megaphone. Your life has become a message God is screaming in silence, not through your words, but through your very existence. Through the way you still smile after they tried to steal your joy. Through the way you still love after they weaponized your heart. Through the way you still shine after they tried to bury you in darkness. You're not a survivor. You're a signal sent from the throne room. Remember Joseph? Thrown in a pit by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, forgotten in prison. But every betrayal was just God repositioning the antenna. Every attack was fine-tuning the frequency. Because when Pharaoh's Egypt needed a word from heaven, guess who was already positioned to deliver it? The one they tried to silence. Your glow is not aesthetic, it's God's broadcast. That peace they can't shake, that's not just healing. That's heaven transmitting through your spirit, disrupting every demonic frequency in a 50-mile radius. That wisdom in your eyes, that's not just experience. That's the mind of Christ downloading through someone who's been purified by fire. That authority in your presence, that's not confidence. That's the anointing speaking before you even open your mouth. Every step you take now echoes into realms unseen. You think you're just walking to the grocery store. You're shifting atmospheres. You think you're just going to work. You're carrying revival in your briefcase. You think you're just living your life. Child, you're a walking earthquake in the spirit realm, and demons scatter when they feel you coming 3 blocks away. David knew this frequency. Saul tried to kill him with a spear, but every time David played his harp, the evil spirits had to flee. Not because David was perfect, but because he carried a signal from the throne room that darkness couldn't tolerate. Your presence does the same thing now, not because you're trying to be spiritual, but because you've been through hell and came back with heaven's Wi-Fi password. You don't walk, you ripple across dimensions. Every toxic person who suddenly gets nervous around you, they're picking up the broadcast. Every manipulator who can't seem to get their hooks in you anymore, the signal is jamming their frequency. Every enemy watching from the sidelines, wondering how you're still standing, they're witnessing a transmission they spent years trying to cut off. But here's where it gets beautiful. You're not just disrupting darkness, you're attracting light. Watch how the right people start gravitating towards you now. Watch how divine appointments become your new normal. Watch how doors start opening that were never supposed to be available to someone with your background, your story, your scars. Elijah knew this power. After Jezebel tried to silence him, after he ran into the wilderness, thinking it was over, God whispered that still small voice. Not in the earthquake, not in the fire, but in the quiet transmission that only the chosen can hear. And suddenly, one prophet became a frequency that exposed 450 false prophets and called down fire from heaven. Your whisper now carries more weight than their screams ever did, because you've been calibrated by suffering. You've been fine-tuned by betrayal. You've been purified by rejection. And now you're broadcasting on a frequency that bypasses human understanding and plugs directly into the supernatural. Your enemies don't just see you, they feel you in their spirit, and it terrifies them because they remember when they tried to destroy this very signal. That anxiety they get when your name comes up, that's not guilt. That's their spirit recognizing a frequency they can no longer jam. That restlessness they feel when they see you thriving, that's not envy. That's the conviction of heaven's broadcast piercing through their carefully constructed denial. You are the frequency of divine correction walking in human form. And the most beautiful part? You don't have to try. You don't have to perform or prove or push. You just have to be, because authentic signals don't need amplification. Truth doesn't need a megaphone. Light doesn't need permission to shine. You are God's response to everyone who tried to silence his voice through you. Every miracle that follows you now, every door that opens, every enemy that falls back, that's not luck. That's the natural result of carrying heaven's frequency in an earth suit. You're not just blessed. You're a blessing with legs, walking around disrupting the status quo of spiritual mediocrity. So when they wonder how you do it, when they ask what changed, when they try to figure out the source of your power, you just smile. Because some frequencies can't be explained. They can only be experienced. And you, chosen one, you are the experience of heaven on earth that they never saw coming. Your presence doesn't just enter rooms, it sanctifies them. Your voice doesn't just speak words, it prophesies futures. Your life doesn't just inspire hope, it broadcasts the sound of victory to every person still fighting in the dark. Comment, I am the frequency of heaven, if you know your presence disrupts darkness without a word. Because what's coming next will show you exactly how God uses your frequency to rewrite the story everyone thought was finished. They told you that you came from broken people, that dysfunction was your DNA, that weakness ran in your veins like some generational disease you'd never escape. They pointed to your family tree and said, "See, this is all you'll ever be." But what if I told you they were terrified of something they saw in you, something that made them panic, something that made them work overtime to convince you that you were nothing? You see, you weren't born into that bloodline by accident. You were strategically placed. Heaven looked at generations of silence, abuse, addiction, and abandonment and said, "Not anymore. Send the one who will end this." You are that one. Every ancestor who died with their voice trapped in their throat, they bled for this moment. Every grandmother who swallowed her dreams, every grandfather who numbed his pain, every parent who repeated what was done to them, they were all building toward you. You were sent to do what generations before you didn't survive. Think about Joseph, thrown in a pit by his own brothers, betrayed by his blood. But that pit, that wasn't punishment, that was positioning. Every attack on Joseph was the enemy trying to stop what was written in his destiny. Sound familiar? You didn't just survive the abuse, you reprogrammed the lineage. While they were busy trying to break you, heaven was busy breaking the pattern. Every tear you cried in silence was washing away generational stains. Every time you chose healing over revenge, you were rewriting the family script. Every boundary you set was a wall they could never cross again. You are the Exodus encoded in human form. But let me tell you what really haunts them. It's not that you survived, it's that you survived and still chose love. You could have become them. You had every excuse to repeat the cycle, to pass down the poison, to let bitterness become your bloodline. But you didn't. Instead, you became the filter, the one who takes in generational trauma and transforms it into generational healing. You became the alchemist who turns family curses into family blessings. And that terrifies the enemy more than anything. Because you're not just healing yourself, you're healing backward and forward. Every choice you make toward wholeness sends shockwaves through the spiritual realm. Your great-grandmother feels it in glory. Your future grandchildren feel it in their DNA. You didn't break the curse, you replaced the root. Think about this. Every person who tried to destroy you was actually fighting against your bloodline destiny. Your mother who couldn't love you right. She was battling generational wounds she never healed. Your father who abandoned you. He was running from a calling he was too broken to carry. The siblings who turned against you, they were jealous of an anointing they could feel but couldn't touch. They weren't just rejecting you, they were rejecting the breakthrough they sensed in your spirit. But here's what makes you dangerous to every demonic assignment against your family line. You refused to become what hurt you. You chose to become what heals you. That's not human strength. That's divine intervention. Remember David? The baby brother his own father forgot to call when the prophet came looking for the next king. His family saw a shepherd boy. Heaven saw a giant killer. They saw the least. God saw the one who would shift everything. Your family saw your sensitivity and called it weakness. Heaven saw it and called it prophetic discernment. They saw your tears and called you broken. God saw them and called them intercession. They saw your silence and called it defeat. The Almighty saw it and called it strategic restraint. You are not the victim of your bloodline, you are the victory. And now, everything that was meant to kill your lineage is becoming the very thing that crowns it. Every generational stronghold that tried to claim you is now breaking under the weight of your breakthrough. Every family demon that whispered this is just how we are is now screaming because you became something they never expected. You became free. Closing, the crown you never knew you were wearing. The bloodline stops with you. The legacy begins through you. Can you feel it? That shift in the atmosphere around your life. That's not coincidence. That's confirmation. You are no longer the wounded walking among the healed. You are the healed walking among the wounded. And your very presence, your peace, your boundaries, your refusal to play their games anymore, it's driving them absolutely mad. Because you became what they said was impossible. You are not a victim who got lucky. You are a warrior who got strategic. You are not someone who survived by accident. You are someone who was preserved by assignment. Every betrayal that should have broken you, every rejection that should have destroyed you, every attack that should have buried you, it all became the very foundation of your authority. You carry the frequency of divine reversal now. And to those who hurt you, who mocked you, who counted you out, you have become their living reminder that they chose wrong. Not because you're seeking revenge, but because you're seeking nothing from them at all. And that indifference, that peace, that complete detachment from their opinion, that's what's destroying them. They thought they were writing your ending, but they were actually scripting their own accountability. The door is closed now, permanently, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom, not out of hatred, but out of healing. You're not going backward to convince anyone of your worth. You're not returning to explain your growth. You're not reopening conversations that ended the moment they chose destruction over development. That chapter is finished, and there are no sequels. Isaiah 43:18-19 says, "Forget the former things, do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland." God didn't just heal your wounds, He transformed them into wells. Every place you were broken became a place others could drink from. Every scar became a story. Every tear became a testimony. You didn't just overcome, you became the overcomer. And now, as you walk in this new authority, remember this. You are living proof that God keeps His promises. You are walking evidence that no weapon formed against you can prosper. You are breathing testimony that what the enemy meant for evil, God turned for good. You are the answer to prayers your ancestors prayed but never lived to see answered. So I need you to declare this over your life, over your lineage, over your destiny. Say it out loud. Type it in the comments. Engrave it on your heart. I am the living consequence of divine justice. I am the walking testimony of God's faithfulness. I am the breakthrough my bloodline has been waiting for. Say it until you feel it in your bones. Say it until it rewrites every lie they told you about yourself. Say it until your spirit remembers what your mind tried to forget. If this message found you, if every word felt like it was written for your story, then you know this wasn't random. This was appointment. This was heaven's way of reminding you that your pain had purpose, Your silence had strategy, and your survival has significance. Share this message, not for views or validation, but for the other wounded warriors who are still believing the lies about themselves. Share it for the chosen ones who haven't realized they're chosen yet. Share it for the ones still trapped in cycles you've already broken free from. Your story is not just your healing, it's someone else's hope. And to those who support this ministry through super thanks or donations, you're not just giving money. You're sowing into the spiritual awakening of a generation. You're partnering with heaven to deliver messages that set souls free. Whether your gift is $5 or $50, it matters. It multiplies. It makes a difference. But know this, whether you give or not, you belong here. Your presence is a gift. Your attention is valuable. Your healing is necessary. As we close, I want you to understand something profound. You are not the same person who started watching this message. Something shifted while you were listening. Something awakened. Something remembered. You walked in wounded. You're walking out as a weapon of divine justice. You came in questioning if God saw your pain. You're leaving knowing you are God's response to your pain. You entered broken. You're exiting as the breakthrough. The chosen ones are rising. The sleeping giants are awakening, and the enemy's worst nightmare is becoming reality. The very people he tried to destroy are becoming the very weapons God uses to expose him. You are living karma. You are walking justice. You are breathing proof that God doesn't just defend his people, he advances them. And that sound you hear in the distance, that's not thunder. That's the sound of every door that was slammed in your face, finally opening.